Dr. Powers, the guest has arrived.
Oh, thank you, Bonnie Castle. Hi, folks. Come on in. Have a seat. There's room for two over here. So I'm so glad you joined me today. This is the first of our Smoke Act sessions for our session. I hope you enjoy them. We'll have 8 of these, and they form the discussions that we'll have in class. Not the only things we're going to talk about, but some of the issues that we take out of the paper. And I have to take them. Today's a Wednesday prior to the course start on Monday, so we're a couple of days behind the actual, whatever the current status is of the stories we talk about. So build on them and add any other stories you'd like to talk about. The Smoke Act sessions is something that in Oxford, the Don, the prof had chambers, sort of quarters, and you did readings there. You didn't so much sit in a classroom, but you'd come down, and the Don would have a small cluster like this of 6 or 7 people around, and through cigars and pipes and port and glasses of sherry, they would talk about issues like we're going to talk about today. And it's through the Socratic dialogue that we exchange ideas and challenge each other and test each other's hypotheses that we tend to get some firm terrain to stand on as through critical thinking and reflective thought, that I'm satisfied with my position. I can defend it. And in this course, that's all we ask you to do. There's no wrong or right answers. Just have some good, hard, reflective thought. And if you're satisfied that your view of the hand is the right view of the hand, then that's where I want you to stand. And it's the same on the exam. There'll be nothing I say to say that is the correct answer. As long as you can give me evidence-based support for your position, you've met the requirements of the course. I don't want you to be overwhelmed with the course. Those of you who had a chance to go in and do a quick scan of the vast array of materials in here, there's a lot. So go directly to the deliverables and see what you have to produce. Just that will get you your mark that you need to have a mark to go through the system. Anything else is bonus. And I had to design it that way. When Pedro came to me and said, Terry, can you take this from a face-to-face class to an online class and keep the standard, I felt quite challenged and frankly wasn't happy about it. I enjoy the face-to-face teaching and the Socratic dialogue and the interaction and the fast moving of a class environment, and it's hard to replicate that into a online situation. But having said that, not just personally me working on it, but really a collection of a wonderful bunch of people like Bonnie Castle that just announced your arrival, and others work hard every week to get these discussions, to edit, and to help me put in the course these rich materials. And I've done it deliberately in the sense that I've had a chance to scan your backgrounds, your bios, both cohorts, and it's interesting. We have such a vast array of folks who are very skilled in strategy, do it almost on a daily basis. Terms like goals, objectives, visions, strategic inflection points, that language, that lexicon will be well known to those folks. There are others of you that I sense this will be rather new, and there'll be a bit of a ramp-up curve to get to understand some of these terms and concepts and notions. And so what I've done is said to everybody, here's the basics in the deliverables, do that, that's all that you're required to do. But for those of you that are already well down the road and becoming strategic practitioners, I put a bonus section in there. And go in there and have a look. It's not required for the exam, but you find a whole bunch of rich things in there that may help you in your day-to-day job. For example, in the second session, I guess, we give you a little red toolbox with about 40 some odd tools in there that you'll use throughout the program, and many in this course. But if for those in the bonus section, I put another 100 tools in there in another box. And more than you'll ever need in your lifetime, but for those interested in strategy and have a passion for it, like I have a passion for it, go in there and have a look around. But the bonus section you'll find rich with materials to look at your pleasure, but do a time appreciation. You need balance in your workplace, balance in your life, and as long as you do the deliverables, I'll be happy. Specifically on the deliverables for these discussion sites, I'd like to make the point that all I expect from you is 2 meaningful posts in a week. 2 meaningful posts in a week. That's not hi, how are you, but that's reflective thought, adding some value, some capital, intellectual capital to the class, and do that for us, and you've met the requirement. That's not to say a number, I've had it in the past, will do 30 or 40 posts in the week because they have a passion. They're enjoying the topic, they're enjoying the flow of the discussion, and I don't want to stifle that. I want you to do that. I want you to enjoy the course and get something out of it, and I'll work with you. But for those that say, look, I've got other things to do and my time is quite tight, just give me 2 meaningful posts on the discussion sites, and you've met the requirements. So that should be helpful in that regard. Critical correctness. I challenge you a little bit on this. I tend to poke the bear a little. there's no political correctness in this class, as long as we're respectful of each other. So we have Muslims in the class and we have Christians in the class, and if we can't have this clash of civilizations, if we can't have these conversations in an academic environment, in a respectful, fair and balanced way, where in the world are you going to have these discussions so you can truly understand? I mean, for example, if I held up my hand and asked you to describe what you see on this side of the hand, you'd probably say, well, an old arthritic hand of a 73-year-old with a ring on it. But if I turned it around here and asked you to describe it, I think you'd agree with me, you'd have to describe it a little bit differently. And so that's what we have to do in this class, is we have to come around from this side of the hand that we view the biases, the way we perceive the world, and come around to this side of the hand and try to stand on that terrain for a few minutes and view the world and get a sense of it. And we're going to do that a lot in this class. That's the only way to establish this critical thinking. And indeed, you may even wonder why in a strategy course are we looking at these emerging issues? And it's because we need to understand the water in the bathtub. If we don't understand the what's about to emerge through the fog and mitigate the damage or exploit the opportunities these changes are going to make in our strategy, in our businesses, and indeed in our lives, then we are not doing our job and what you're being paid for. And most of you are being paid for one thing at your work, and that's to be strategists, to help lead your company. And so we'll talk more about that as the course unfolds. I think I've covered all the points that I wanted to cover, other than say that I'm available to you. I'll work with you. I want you to have some time with your families, and I mean it sincerely. And this is not meant in my course to be a boot camp. It's meant to have some downtime on the weekends. But I accept there's a number of you working so hard during the week, you must do the work on the weekends to get through the course, and I accept that. But I'm saying to most people, I'll expect that it's Friday night. I don't expect to see you around on the weekends. I want you to spend some time with your families, to do what you have to do, but get some downtime and join me again on Monday morning. For those of you that have to work on the weekends, because you can't get it done during the week, I'll be there, I'll be available to you and working with you on the weekends and doing some posts and answering some of your questions throughout the weekends. But as many of you as can, I do underscore the importance of you getting some downtime with your family, because it's putting great stress on the family and on your children, those that have them, and I want you to spend a little time with them. I'll be available to you anytime you want to call, 250, make a note, 250-472-3836, 472-3836 in Victoria. And I've got a better office at home than I have here on the campus, and so I tend to work on these online courses from my home for the next 8 or 9 weeks. And so most of the time you'll find me at that number, unless I'm in at my office here doing meetings and other work. That's where you'll find me. Well, that having been said, it's my pleasure now to introduce to you Sandy Walker. As I mentioned to you, a well-seasoned practitioner, very excellent in strategic planning and consulting in that area, and delighted to have Sandy collaborate with me as a co-instructor for both these cohorts. So you're going to see a lot of Sandy as time goes on, and I certainly want to wish her well. So Sandy, say hello to the folks.
Thanks for that introduction, Terry. It's great to see everybody again back online. Welcome to Strategy. This is one of the best courses for any MBA student. Strategic thinking is applicable in business and in life. So I hope you enjoy the course that Terry has put together, and I will see you online.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sandy. Now we'll move on, I think, with some of the stuff that's in the news. Certainly, this whole session is about the water in the bathtub. Before we can craft strategies, we need to understand what's swirling around us, what's likely to impact both externally and internally the crafting and implementation of our strategic plan. And so that's why we take a few minutes in each week just to scan very quickly at a very high level the front page of the newspaper, if you would, and the business section of the newspaper, and try through critical thinking, merge the two together and draw some so whats as how it might impact our country, how it might impact the globe, in fact, our country, our businesses, our families, and you as individuals. And there's a number of things swirling that sometimes we just gloss over. We read the short article on the front page of the paper and say, well, Ebola, here's the story on it, so many people died, whatever it happens to be. But we don't draw the conclusions, what possible outcomes that might have for us as Canadians, and what we should do to be proactive rather than reactive to these sort of stories. So simply restating the story to me on the exam or in your papers barely qualifies to get through with a pass, but where you'll get the points is to show me that reflective, hard, critical thinking as to move it along past the story into our lives and into our environment. So let's practice a bit of that today, and indeed on the final exam you'll be asked to do exactly the same thing, and I'll talk more about this as we get farther along as to the final exam. I'll be proposing short little snippets and asking you to draw some conclusions in the context of the materials that we cover in the course. So the first one I notice here, and I guess my glasses would help, at my age I find glasses certainly help, is that Harper's received a mandate to go into the Middle East to fly 600 personnel and up to 9 military aircraft to do battle with this emerging Islamic State. And so on its face, that's fine, and I give Harper full credit. He's done it the correct way, as did the Brits. They held a proper, good, stiff debate, listened to both sides of the argument, and then having voted as a democracy should to move ahead, they moved ahead. The interesting case in the British case is they said, look, we will not authorize Syria, we will not authorize boots on the ground, but we will authorize Iraq rather, because we've received an invitation from the Prime Minister and we have a United Nations mandate to do just that, and therefore within bounds of the legal proprieties. And I'm not sure that's the same case with our American cousins to the south as they invade Syria and go after the ISIS folks. But there's no right or wrong answers in this class. It's open for debate, and in this class I think I've mentioned there's no political correctness. If you can't have those discussions, I've already talked about that, I want you to have them here. And so we have a situation in the Middle East that's still primarily tribal situation. We have the Sunni and the Shia sort of fighting each other with the Kurds up in the north. And this is a tribal thing that's been going on since the death of Muhammad 1400 years ago. And it's unlikely it's going to end in any time near future. But what we do see happening here is the crystallization of lines being redrawn primarily along the lines of where the Sunni are now in the majority, as well as an eye to the oil to see what can be possibly included in their piece. And that's what they're now carving out. And if they're successful with this carve out, we may see the complete loss of Iran. We may see Syria, a chunk of Syria disappear. We may see Saudi Arabia take over the bottom part of Iran, being Sunni, and this is Sunni sort of type folks. So there's lots of new lines possible to be redrawn here. The impact for us, of course, goes directly to the so what's, to the oil supplies. It also impacts on some of your colleagues and some Canadians who are Muslims. This has far-reaching implications, and we have to think carefully when we say we are going to go and drop bombs on Muslims, this ISIS folks. But no right or wrong answers, but let's have a discussion around that today. Do you think it's a role that Canada should play in? Is there an exit strategy to all this? This can go on for years. Also, I see here on the front page of the paper that the Post Media, the Sun Media Corporation, is now going to be sold out to a large fund for about $300 million, which primarily is owned by American investors. And that brings to the thought, I mean, that's the story, but the thought of that is, what are the likely impacts to be to this very large part of the Canadian media being controlled externally? And if that's the case, and if the American mainstream media are any indication of where it's going, is that something we want in Canada, or do we want a different voice to be heard in Canada? And so we could look at that. Certainly an issue. Certainly to be a democracy, to be a free country, the only way you can be a free country, one of the prime attributes you must have, of course, is the ability for freedom of speech, a free press. And we certainly don't want to see that impugned and impacted in any way. We have a story here about Beijing with the Hong Kong situation going on. We have the situation now where Beijing is pushing back through its ambassador to Canada, asking us to lighten up a little bit on our strident position on human rights in Hong Kong. And on its face, that certainly has implications economically, that China, we're trying to grow a relationship and a trade relationship with this, now the largest, on a purchasing power parity basis, the largest economy in the world is China. Certainly America on a GNP, GNI basis is still the largest, but it is very quickly, the gap is closing. That being the case, China is an important trading partner for us. We're an Asian country, all the Pacific. We have a ability to deal with them, and we have to be careful, or at least think carefully about what battles we can fight, what ones we can't. Indeed, we may want to even raise the question is, by what authority do we in Canada only been around since 1867, formulating our human rights values on those of the Judeo-Christian sort of background. In fact, they were put together by a Canadian doctor for President Roosevelt's wife about 1944 when she chaired the UN, putting together for the first time a set of standards on human rights. Well, they were based by a Canadian doctor on the values that we hold or held at that time in Canada. And so what right do we have to go to other cultures who've been around far longer, 2,500 years anyway for China, where it was the Middle Kingdom, the center of the universe, other than the period of humiliation from around 1850 to about the time the bamboo curtain came down, 1978. That period is the period of humiliation, but what they see now is simply the restoration of bringing back China as the center of the universe once again, the Middle Kingdom. And what rights do we have to go to cultures of that nature and pound on the chest saying, follow these as human rights, and not accept that these nations were around far longer with their own set of standards for human rights? And is it sort of a little myopic to say, ethnocentric to say, these are the right rights and yours rights don't matter? I poke the bear a little bit, but it's good to have these sort of discussions rather than just take on the face that we're absolutely right and they're absolutely wrong. So have that conversation. There's no, say, political correctness in it. Well, Ebola is sort of on topic of everybody's mind, and we can read the story. As I say, it's barely a pass to give me back some facts about so many cases, so many people died, etc., etc. But what are some conclusions we can draw on there? I mean, does Canada have any pandemic plans? Do you have a pandemic plan? Does your organization have a pandemic plan? Keep in mind there's only 19 level 4 beds, I understand it, in the States that have the capacity to deal with Ebola patients of this caliber of a viral disease. And only one, I think, in Britain. I'm not sure if we have any or how many we have in Canada, but the point is it'd be a very, very small number. So if 100 Ebola cases broke out in Canada, were to be brought here, I'm not sure we have the capacity to deal with them safely. And so we could talk a bit about that, and if that is true, what guards should we be putting up at the borders, what screening, and we check each person for the men in black and the Gruppenführers doing the thing, and do you have liquor and do you have cigarettes, but do we actually ask, how do we control these sort of infectious pandemics coming across our borders? And a difficult answer, but we could talk a bit about it. How are you prepared at home to deal with this? Certainly the case of the, I think it was the Dawson boy in Austin, Texas, when his family was isolated there, they didn't bring them food for 5 or 6 days. So do you have some food and some facilities and take care of that? I mean, this idea, imagine for a moment, we're pretty well off, you folks, myself, if you're sitting in a country like that and we had this fire burning of Ebola that people were dropping left and right, and you had the money, what would you do? You have sort of Ebola tourism, I suppose. We would run to the local plane, hang off the wheels, and be insisted to fly. And where we want to fly? You want to fly to a country that had good health care. And so America, Canada are right up on the top of the targets, I would think. If I was in those 3 countries in Africa, I'd be looking at how can I take a 90-day vacation in America or in Canada and come across till I'm sure this is blown out and that we're safe. And who has the medical care? And so what about Ebola tourism? Should we be thinking about that a little bit, and how do we stop it? What's the financial impact on all this that it comes across? I mean, we're speculating a little bit here, but certainly they've tried a number of vaccines to cure this with some moderate degree of success and failure. But I anticipate in the next, this time between now and Christmas, they will come out with one that will have not gone through all the FDA approvals, and I think Canada's got its own trying to get through, but will not have gone through all the approvals, but in the sense of, like SARS and the swine flu, I wouldn't be surprised to see them come out and say quite firmly that we have to take this new vaccine or else be isolated some way. And the Americans already have that law passed that if they have some sense of respiratory situation down there, the government has the absolute right just to put you and lock you away in a FEMA camp or something for a while until they get to the bottom of this. And so watch for that crisis to develop and that possibility to happen. But again, poking the bear a little, have that discussion, and what if you were asked tomorrow to take this untested vaccine? What would your reaction be? I'd like to hear your thoughts. Climate change. Tories behind climate change targets. So they've done a study. The Commissioner on Environmental and Sustainable Development has done the study of Canada and its progress. You may recall we signed on to do this, and by 2020 we agreed, and I think it was a 17% reduction in our emissions. And keep in mind, our greenhouse emissions are primarily two things. They're carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. And carbon dioxide, of course, is a good thing. It helps plants grow. Without that, plants don't grow. Carbon monoxide is what kills you in your car if you breathe too much of it. And so, how do you feel about climate change? I mean, it started with global warming, and that's got knocked down, but now climate change, people are saying climate change, and it's your fault, and it's my fault. Or is it simply the cycles over the tens of thousands of years? It comes and ebbs and flows. Indeed, there's some argument we're now going back into a short cooling zone. So let's talk about climate change and the role of Canada, and should we honor our commitment to reduce the environmental emissions that we are putting out, or is it spending money that we could place better in other things that need to be placed? Good topic anyway for discussion and draw some conclusions. What else do I want to talk about? And you can pick up any topic if you wish as you go through the paper or any other article you read. Just introduce it on the discussion site and say, you know, I'd like to talk about this, and then not just cut and paste the story, but like we're doing here, draw some possible conclusions, poke the bear a little bit. Let's get a bit of a dialogue going over it. This one, it was interest to me that scientists are not shielded from politics. And they're talking about scientists that work for the Canadian government, primarily in universities and things, are not protected from political interference and assured that they can speak freely and openly about their work, that there's some fetters being placed on grants and things. If they don't say the right things, the grants get cut off. And it was Simon Fraser University brought this up. And I should say, first of all, biases. We have to understand that Simon Fraser is a right-wing based in Aristotle and David Mills, John Adams and David Mills and David Ricardo, rather, and the right-wing, independent, less taxes, less government, get out of my way, versus the left-wing, which is grounded not in Aristotle but in Plato, the collectivist, the Marxist, the socialist, all for one, one for all sort of mentality. And so when you read stuff by Simon Fraser, indeed read stuff by anybody, to include yourself, understand the biases that people come and the side of the house that they're positioning for, so you can actually strip that away and try to get some facts on the table to ingest and draw some conclusions. But this study was done by Simon Fraser, and on the left side of the house in Canada we have the Canadian the policy for alternatives, which gives the left-wing side of the house of stuff in Canada, and they're worth looking at as well. But the interesting thing here is that, going back to the Ebola situation, is that it seems to me that when we read the papers, we're going to see two threads. We're going to see, like in the Ebola case, we're going to see the health answers, the health thread being discussed. These are the directors for disease control, and those sort of people come out and make the statements. And on the other side, you see the folks speaking for the politicians, for the political agenda, and sometimes they don't align. They're going to go this way and don't want to see the tourism destroyed because of the oil spill down in the Gulf or whatever it happens to be, or we don't want to see the tourism stopped in Toronto because of SARS. And so watch for the political spin to try to say all is well, nothing to worry about, and then the other side of the house saying, here are some facts, cautious facts, but facts, and it's your job to discern between the two messages to see, are they in alignment or out of alignment, and if so, why? Anyway, a lesson to be learned from that, it seems to me. And a lot about Harper's War across the way, and that's interesting. Oh, here's a big story. SNC-Lavalin, a large engineering firm in Canada. It's a Canadian engineering giant, international. You all know it, I'm sure. And a while back, they got picked up for bribes and things they were doing in Libya to gain contracts. And now, of course, the shoes are starting to land. And they have fired the CEO. I forget his name, Pierre, forget his last name. But he got fired over this. So they have made some attempts to right the wrongs over this bribery case. But now they're making what appears to be a threat. They're saying that we can't afford, no, if you fine us, we're deeply concerned if we're charged, that we may have to take 5,000 jobs out of Canada. And so that's a not too veiled threat, it seems to me, to the powers to be. as they consider what's the appropriate sanction for this company that has certainly some cultural, some ethical shortcomings, and how they're going to be dealt with. But that's the story. But at the next level down for us is the importance of culture in our organization. We'll talk about that in this course, and the importance of ethics in our everyday business. In fact, one of your colleagues a number of years ago went through the MBA course. He was one of the managers for Coast Capital, I recall, and he said something one day quite profound. He said, "Terry, all we have to sell is our brand," and that resonated with me, because that really is all you have to sell. It's all your company has to sell is your brand. And when they destroy a brand like this, and you can destroy it in 15 seconds, you can work for 35 years building a brand, and in 15 seconds making the wrong judgment call, you can blow it. And we give some guidance in this course when you get to the Bentley ethical test. The Bentley ethical test, you'll find some guidance in there on when the door is closed and you're left to yourself and you have to make that hard decision. There are 6 questions you ask yourself, and you'll be discussing those a little later in the course. I see Europe retreats from its, they called of course, the oil sands dirty, and wanted to ban all oil coming out of the sands, and now they're lightening off on that, getting ready to have a vote on it. But it looks very positive news for Alberta that now the tar sands oil will be allowed to be used by Europe, and if so, by definition, I think the Americans may lighten up too, because they too were using that as a concern. But the Americans are very much taking care of themselves first, developing their own oil reserves and production facilities and pipeline facilities, and they're not in a rush to take our Keystone pipeline because they have enough within their in-house. And so we desperately need pipelines either going off to China or a pipeline from the prairies across into Churchill out and across over to Europe, and let us supply at the higher rate, because we get the Brentwood rate rather than the Western Texas rate, which is generally $2, $3, $4 higher a barrel. And so there's a lot to be said. That's good news, and we'll watch for this happening and how the vote goes in Europe over the next little bit. Oh, here's one here. It's just an app. It's a new app by Ontario's Learn Life Incorporated, but it's emergency measure reference for vets, and it's both apps. But on its face, that's a good little story. But what I want to zoom out for a minute, and we'll talk more about in a large way in this course, the Internet of Things, because that's transforming. In fact, we're almost moving from the industrial age to this Internet of Things age, where we have to think differently. We have to think more creatively. We can't use the old mental models and things that we developed to deal with the industrial age problems of efficiency and replication and that out of a factory. And we have to think now in the terms of this new sensor system. There will be millions and millions and millions of them in the next 6 or 7 years that control your toasters, your ovens, your thermostats, your cars, Google, etc. will all be done for you. We're going in and very quickly going into this new world, and we need to pay attention to these sort of apps, but more importantly, pay attention to this Internet of Things coming our way. And because of that, because the Internet, the power of the Internet, it's reducing the marginal costs and the fixed costs of producing widgets. And I say the fixed costs in the sense that it doesn't cost any more, for example, for a newspaper to produce this way. It costs them so much a page and the labor costs, etc., to do it. But when I put it up online, this newspaper, and have done it once, that's my fixed cost, it's done, the amortization of that spread out over the number of people that go online to read the Huffington Post and the Daily Beast and online magazines of this nature, the cost diminishes down to pennies for that additional use. So there's now a marginal cost society in many, many areas, and if that is true, there's so much in here we need to think about as you go back to your organizations and companies. How are you going to harness that to make your organization sort of a marginal cost organization where you can produce almost at infinity new products and services at little or no cost, and the world as a result will be better off because of it. Anyway, I've thrown a few points around just to get the conversation started. What I want from you, and I make it clear one more time, don't be overwhelmed by the course, please. It's a fun course. You only have to do for me what it says to do in the deliverables. All the rest of that stuff is just bonus material. If you have time, if you don't, burn a copy and take it with you. Discussion sites, you need to have some sense of what's in the paper and what's going on around us. And so each week we'll spend a few minutes discussing things locally and regionally and internationally that may impact on our business. It may not, but we'll have a look at them and have a dialogue. And all I want from you is 2 meaningful posts in the run of a week. That's all. 2 meaningful posts in the run of a week. Now, I've had others in the past that may put 30 posts up there. They really get into it and they're having fun, and that's great. Sandy and I will work with you and respond the best we can. But it's that dialogue that raises the awareness, the appreciation among all of us collectively. We all rise on that by just strengthening our sense of understanding of the world around us. And so I don't want you overly done by that. I think that's all I want to say today. I hope you do enjoy. This is the first of the series. 7 more to go. Call me anytime, and Sandy will post her number up shortly. Have a good day. Bye-bye now.